Humanitarians Life with Viki. Hi, Viki.
Hi, Asel. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening to everyone.
Yes, so we are talking today about a specific question that we tend to get a lot, that question of how to deal with an anxiety during transitioning. And the way that we will structure is basically to look at what are the ways of solving an anxiety does not work, and what are the ways of solving does, and how you can apply that to your situation. So, Vicky, maybe before we start talking about it, is like maybe you can give us some context
Mhm.
specifically where this question comes up,
Yeah.
so that people can relate to it.
Yeah. Thank you, Asel, and thank you for the intro. So what I'm thinking is that as we are, and I think both of us working with clients, and also from our own experience, we know that anxiety shows up at some stage of the transition. I don't think I met anyone who has had a transition without any anxiety at all.
Yeah.
So I think this is important to say that these kinds of feelings will most likely show up. The difference with some people, it shows up in a limited way, and then they can manage it or are used to managing easily. For others, it is a very present feeling that the anxiety is there quite for quite a long time, and maybe even can be showing up on a daily basis in certain periods. So I think maybe this, I would mention it as an introduction. That's why I think it's so important to talk about anxiety and how to deal with it in the context of the transition. So I will maybe stop here.
Yeah, and also just for anyone who is not during transition currently and they have, their humanitarian life going on and other things. I also am coaching client currently who is going through this anxiety in the process of becoming a mother, and another one becoming a partner and having the relationships, right? So therefore, like whatever the transition, the change that we go through, this feeling of worry, feeling of, oh my God, what's going on, the uncertainty, the fears, all of this you will experience whenever the change is happening, right? So that's why the anxiety, I think, is a term that oftentimes like encompasses many other feelings that we find difficult to stay around or difficult to handle it, and we tend to start doing actions that may not always help. So let's start with Vicky, the question of what are the ways that um, we experience an anxiety, and what are the things that we do to feel calmer again, and how that doesn't work. So what are your experiences on that?
Yeah. So I would say that from my experience and what I'm seeing with clients is that when the anxiety comes, that many try to search for solution outside. It is, and just to say that anxiety, there is, I mean, the message that, or the anxiety comes when we are doing something that we haven't been doing before. We are going out, maybe out of our usual ways. We are doing something we haven't done before. We are thinking about it, and that's why the anxiety arises. So there is nothing wrong about it, in a sense that why it comes. Now, I would say the mistake or that many people do is that, oh, anxiety comes, I must be doing something wrong, or I must be trying to find solution outside of myself, without actually trying to understand where is the anxiety coming from. And so here I would probably I would say the first thing, understanding what are the situations. We don't have to understand where it's coming from, etc., but what are the situations, when does the anxiety arise, and getting to know what are the moments. Is it in particular situations of the day? Is it with a particular person? Is it a particular
Yes.
subject that you start thinking about it and already you feel that you're getting worked up, that it's
Yeah.
so I would stop here. Maybe
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you.
Yeah. So the the biggest, I think, directions that we tend to take when we are in anxious situation is we tend to, like you said, we tend to search for the stabilizing factors or like factors outside of us that make us feel like we are safe or make us feel like we're calm, we're stable, right? And we, in order to do that, we tend to then like search for different options. We tend to, maybe if we're searching for a job, then we may even consider going for the job that's not really ideal, but we just want to go there so that we can then feel like, okay, everything is okay, that I will be having my paycheck, or I will uh, be able to tell my friends that I'm not unemployed, right? So for many of us, it's a difficult
Yeah.
thing to say. Or I have even heard some humanitarians tell me that they don't even tend to go and socialize with people because they just feel shame of going through this transitioning and not really getting to where they want to. And therefore, what we tend to do is basically try to like find something so that we can say, okay, now I can feel calm or I can feel safe,
Yeah.
right? So that's one of the ways that I see a lot of people do, which then unfortunately happens is that once we get that job, that was not really what we wanted to get it anyway. And then we feel bad about being in that place. And then we feel like, okay, why did I do this? I could have then just stayed where I was before.
Yeah.
Then what was the change anyway, right? So then we start regretting our decision. So that's why I'm saying that this way of solving an anxiety does not work. I
Mhm.
have tried it. Many of my clients have tried it, and that's not how we want to solve it. And the other way that I think many of us try to solve it, which was also my experience, is even we were going to the same direction, let's say, but within that, keep creating a lot of drama
Mhm.
um, of, oh, this is not working, that's not working. Like someone has the answer and keep like wanting to get someone else's opinion about it,
Yeah.
or someone else's, I don't know, yes, you are doing right, kind of like, I don't know, approval of it. And in the meantime, like being exhausted of all the ways that of overthinking, all the ways of worrying about it, without really like getting into the nitty gritties of, okay, why do I think it's not working, or where do I need to really focus on, what do I need to do, and then having that like less emotional approach to evaluating it or approach to assessing what's going on. And I think that's the thing that we don't tend to do. And therefore, because our drama and exaggeration is so high up, that we can tend to create more anxiety
Mhm.
in addition to what we already had before, right? And now we need to have more like even stronger reason to calm ourselves, and we can't really find it. And many of us tend to maybe go not do anything and then just keep going on this search of answers, or not wanting to do anything and just stay, or isolate ourselves. And then we understand that we're going in the wrong direction, basically.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm hearing, Asel, from you is that for a lot of people, what happens is that initially they go for transition of finding a job or a life that they want, but meanwhile, as the anxiety arises, they find themselves actually tackling the call of the anxiety and responding to anxiety by
Yeah.
external action. So
Yeah.
I am responding to, so I'm trying to, I was going to find a job that I really want or new life, but actually my anxiety is so big that I am going to get any job or even the job I didn't want before just to calm my anxiety because I can't
Yeah.
live with it. And so I think these scenarios are very real, and I think we've all seen them. And
Yeah.
that's so what I believe here is really trying to manage the anxiety. And I think there are so many different ways and workshops and possibilities managing the anxiety. But I would also like to say that maybe complete diminution of anxiety from one day to another should also not be expected. I think it's a very tall order to think that from there is some magic that can happen, and from one day to another day I can eliminate the anxiety. So I think if we go really in a way that we want to address and want to understand where this is coming from and tackle really the core issue. So I would say at this stage that really understanding where it's coming from and seeing what is it, how could I reduce the amount of internal stress I'm feeling.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where I find that the analogy of like crying toddler, that's such a good analogy in that sense of like we know babies cry, right? I think it's not a secret. And sometimes they go into tangents, and even though it's very hard to tolerate and just
Mm-hmm.
be there, but it's something that we know babies do. And the same goes for our own anxiety, right? So when we go to uncertain situations, when we go and make changes, our internal fear-based brain will want to scream, and that's just part of the process for many of us. If you don't experience it, amazing, well for you. But for many of us, this is something that we need to expect. And what's important in that moment is that we're not letting that toddler then drive the direction, right? It's not making the decisions. It's not um, like shooting the call or whatever it's called in English. Basically, taking the last word. This should not be done by that toddler because we know that toddler is not going to make a decision that's going to suit us,
Mm-hmm.
and it can even be dangerous at times because we may want to make radical decisions and then later not like whatever decisions we've made. So therefore, I think the biggest skill that we can all learn is, like you said, Vicky, understanding it, but also really staying and allowing it to be there
Yeah.
and expecting that this is something that we go through. Yes, our brain wants us to be safe, our brain wants us to be certain, and but we are going to a direction that we really want to go. And therefore, keeping that in mind, right? The goal is in mind to say, but I want to do this or I want to go through this. Learn to allow that anxiety to be there and still keep going to the direction we want to is a skill that we can practice. It needs practicing, even though when I tell this to people, many people tell me, well, it sounds very easy but difficult to do. Absolutely. It sounds easy, but it's difficult to do. But what I have learned to be true is that we have the capabilities, we have the human body. If it's producing something, it also knows how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that somehow comforts me to believe that whatever my body is producing, or the brain, right, the producing it, it also knows how to deal with it, meaning how to handle it. Our job is to give space and listen in whichever the way that feels comfortable to you, so that you allow this to be there, and with compassion, with love, see how it dissipates on its own.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I love the metaphor with the toddler, with the crying toddler. I think this is this. If there was one takeaway, I think this metaphor would be definitely the takeaway, that you don't give the toddler the decision about your life or its life.
Yeah,
Definitely not to give toddler the final decision. So what would be the next step? What I'm hearing is really to understanding the anxiety, what are the moments that it's happening, and what is also the narrative that we are telling ourselves.
yeah,
What is happening in our minds, because very often it's emotion, but it's also a story we are telling
yeah,
ourselves, a story where we are saying, oh, I can't handle it,
yeah,
or this is impossible, I can't cope with it, I
yeah,
need to find a job right now. And
yeah.
it's some sort of a story that we are telling ourselves that is probably not helping us, that is probably not very helpful for us. So I would encourage, in that moment when you realize what is the story that you are telling yourself, to rewrite it.
Yeah.
Because we may be saying, I need to find a job right now. I don't care. I can't deal with it. So how can you rewrite this story? What is it that you want to tell yourself? Do you want to tell yourself, I'm going to go through it and find the best job for myself? I'm, or what other ever story or narrative? Because these we tend to think that they are just simple things, but if this thought keeps on coming repeatedly all the time, this is what we will believe, because
Yes.
our mental our minds are very powerful, more than we want to believe.
Yes.
So rewriting the
And
story.
exactly. And I wanted to just add to that is that what helps me, for instance, is to go through my mind and say, in that moment when the anxiety is hitting, right? So my brain is then comes up with a solution to say, okay, let's just find something, right? Let's say that I was searching for a job and now I just say, okay, I'm just going to go for any job, let's say.
Mhm,
In that moment, then what helps me to go through the whole scenario and say, okay, let's say I took any job.
mhm. Yeah.
And then I went there and I started doing my job. And then soon enough, after a few even months of the calmness hits, and then like my anxiety is not there, then my other emotions start popping up and say, well, why did we even then do the transitioning if we just went to any other job, right? The reason why we went for transitioning was because we didn't like the one that we had before for whatever reasons, right? Now, if we replace it just with any other, then we're like disappointed even more, and
Exactly.
that's the scenario that I like bring to my brain to go play all the way through and then say, okay, but that's not what I want to be doing. And
Exactly.
especially if I can't really stick to that job long term wise,
Mhm,
whatever that long term definition for me is, then why would I even start going there in the first place? Right? So therefore, then it becomes clear to my like logical brain that just giving in to that anxiety is not a solution,
yeah.
basically. And the solution then is either sticking to my goal that I have set out for myself and then going through this anxiety, or take any or go back to what I know, which I don't like either, right? So therefore, when I know that the alternatives are not really what I'm looking for, then what I'm left with is just facing my anxiety and
Mhm,
sitting with it and recognizing my usual story, the narrative, like Vicky said. I have noticed more narratives from my clients where they say, oh, it's so complicated,
mhm.
or they say it's so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And whenever we say it's so overwhelming, what we're saying really is, I can't handle it, right? And when we're saying I can't handle it, our brain hears that and it starts desperately searching for solutions,
Yeah.
which are not going to be good solutions, because in the moment your brain is trying to just get you a
Mhm.
relief,
Yeah.
and that relief is not always the solution that we may want, right? So that's why if we're not seeking for that immediate relief, then we may as well sit with whatever the anxiety comes up with. And it's actually not that long. I timed it many times. It comes
Okay.
up to
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Five is max.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if
But
you
thank
can
you
handle
for
five,
mentioning.
it's
Yeah.
fine. Yes, sir.
Yes, it's. I love how you timed it, and indeed, I think this point of being overwhelmed is extremely important, and I think that's also my experience. I don't get an anxiety a lot, but sometimes there is this absolutely debilitating feeling of overwhelm, that this probably few seconds that it
Yeah,
feels like I can't handle this at all. And these
yeah,
are the moments, you say, as we say, stick with it, be there. It's not for a long time. I also sometimes say park it. For me, I
yeah,
park it for, it doesn't mean I have to be all these 5 minutes at the
yeah,
beginning, but let's park it. Let's give ourselves 30 seconds. And then you start breathing through it and slowly start realizing it.
yeah.
I'm actually went today through such a state of shock. And then I said, okay, walk, just walk with it,
Yeah.
go with it. I was outside walking the dogs. And then I believe probably after 1 minute, I started thinking clearly. So the anxiety subsided. So I do believe that just like in some other situations, we think it's hours, but it's actually seconds or very short minutes. but it's important to get to start going into it. And you can go in and out of it. That's
Yeah.
okay. But don't just completely switch off and say, no, I'm never going to that, because you will never be
Yeah.
addressing the question of anxiety. You will always be only avoiding it. And I think that's has lifelong consequences as well. Not positive.
Yes. And also, I think it's important for us to, in that moment, to realize is that the more powerful we make this anxiety over us, over our lives, the more it will continue ruling us, right? Meaning that it will keep determining what we can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And I think, like, the way that I think of feeling and allowing and being with emotions is mostly for not only knowing that this is me producing them and also me handling them, but also knowing that I am powerful enough to handle whatever comes up and resilient enough to handle, right? Whatever comes up. And even in the moment, maybe I'm not able to do that. So then breathing is absolutely key. But like Vicky said, that we can always come back to it and lessen its power over time, because with time, some of our emotions also lessens in its intensity, right? So therefore, us coming back to it later can also be very helpful. Or knowing yourself that I'm not going to deal with it now because I have other things that I'm dealing with,
Yeah.
right? But I will do that later when I am in a emotional state that I can really look at it and be with it. That's also fine. I think the key is not to suppress and trying to just like ignore and hoping it goes away.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think we have talked a lot about how you can deal with it. So I think the last prompt that maybe I will give to everyone to think about
Mhm.
is whatever the you have noticed so far that an anxiety comes up or you believe this is an anxiety, it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't really matter whether you are in that moment saying the right emotion or whether this is exactly it or not, because that's, I think, not really the point. The point is this is bothering you, right? That's really the point, and your brain is trying to solve this in some way. Then you can just get curious as to, okay, how do I want to do this in the way that still gets me to the place I want to go to,
Yeah.
and not just try to like um, find a quick solution, let's say, or quick fix, which then will not really serve you in the long run anyway. Yeah. Anything, Vicky, you would like to add before
I
we?
think that's I think probably less is more in many
Yeah.
subjects, and I believe probably I would say do let us know how you're coping with the anxiety, because we know it's very present for many, and we would love to support you if you reach out to us. But also we would love to hear about your journeys. If how are you dealing with it? What is working for you? I think these feedbacks are very useful for everyone. Thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. And I just want to remind you that trusting yourself that you can handle it and getting curious about it will always help you understand it better than keep being afraid of it. And if anything that has helped in my own journey is always trusting that what if I can handle it? What if I can actually look at it, right? And all of these curiosities help me come closer and closer to a point that now I don't even see that as a
Mhm.
huge thing. But it is possible for you to get to the other side of feeling like, okay, I know what it is. I know how to handle it.
Yeah,
I also know how not to let it make my decisions,
yeah,
because I want to make a decision from this powerful place or from the empowered place, whatever the other trusting place, right? And that's really what we want you to be experiencing, is trusting your goal and keep going for it.
mhm.
Even when, yeah, your brain wants to scream like a toddler and say the things.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Vicky, for being here with us and listening to answers to this question. And do let us know if you have any questions or suggestions or want coaching. Have a beautiful week, and we'll talk to you very soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.